We've always paid what we've paid in a transaction, what we've pitched to start with, we've always paid. Right? What we always do on an acquisition on the first day is we say, hey, that we know this has been a bit of a shift for you guys and a change and a bit of stress. Take your families out for dinner on us, right? Because that's our culture and we're about recognising people. We've always been about building a balance sheet, right? Because then we can run the distance. So when the tough times come, we've got a balance sheet. I've always believed everything's a fruit of culture. Right, and it's people first, and health and safety is a fruit of culture, financial performance is customer delivery, is quality, delivery, everything is a fruit of culture. Sometimes you just need to go to bed, right? Walk in the door and just go to bed, because a tired mind is fertile ground for negativity. Mindset is such an important thing. What we tend to do in the tougher times of the economy is we invest in our business. Great time to acquire, we use our balance sheet, let's go out to grow, right? Let's double down, let's go faster, right? Because we'll put our foot on the accelerator, other people take theirs off. Let's put our foot down and let's go for growth.
Hi, I'm Josh, the host of Two Commas, the podcast. Welcome to the show. Great show today. We talk always to entrepreneurs. We're moving into the advisory space actually fairly soon as well. But today we have Mike Marr on the show. Mike's a fascinating character as he's been the founder of 10 companies, so occupies that serial entrepreneur space. However, he's made 15 acquisitions. You heard that correctly, 15 acquisitions. So we're going to delve deep into the journey today, what makes an acquisition a great one, some war stories and some interesting challenges that he's had along the way. Mike, by background, is the founder and the chair of the TPT Group, which is a family-oriented business. The name is such that he wanted to have separation from kind of name and the asset, which we'll get into that as we go through the conversation. He's the recipient of a number of leadership awards, the Blake Leader Award in 2020, the Beta Gamma Sigma Medallion of Entrepreneurship in 2017, which is a global award, and he was a finalist in the EY Entrepreneur of the Year Awards in New Zealand in 2014. He's also got a strong philanthropic bent, that's a charitable bent, and he founded the Runway Foundation with his wife Therese in 2015, which is a registered charitable trust that supports families experiencing ADHD, which Mike also experiences in his life. So Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josh. Great to be here. Great to come and share a bit about the journey.
Lovely. We always start these conversations with a bit of a backstory. So could you introduce yourself to the audience and listeners, please, Mike?
Look, sure. I'm originally an electrician by trade. I started off my career as an apprentice electrician, and I think in that sort of game or that sort of career, you learnt to think outside the box a little bit as well, and then moved into corporate and into senior management roles. And I guess one day I sort of thought to myself, wait, there must be more, right? It's one of those sort of moments. And instead of working for a big corporate, hey, this dream I had was to do my own business and take that plunge. But no one could have lacked confidence more than me. I was just this total lack of confidence, and it was just that I had a very supportive wife who gave me that push. Well, come on, get on, and you can do it, sort of thing. And then once I sort of started, I was away, but that was quite a challenge. And then it's been this amazing journey from our first business or founding the group, I guess, to what we are today of acquisitions. And a big change for us is when we acquired the Siemens business in New Zealand. So.
Yeah. Thanks for your candour there, Mike. Lacking confidence is not something that people kind of ordinarily acknowledge and talk to. And when you said thinking outside the box, I immediately went, you were thinking outside the fuse box. I couldn't help myself, bad pun. But you mentioned that you had a really supportive wife, but what else did you do to counteract, to deal with that lack of confidence? Because a lot of business people talk about their confidence as being something that's helped them through. So what did you do to kind of, deal with that?
Yeah, look, I think it was taking those initial baby steps. And if I look back, I used to be very good at, I'm not saying I'm very good at it these days, but I used to be very good at doing business plans and stuff like that. And it was always in stages. So stage 1 of the business looked like this, stage 2 was like this, stage 3 was like this, and stage 4. Because I guess stress equals a lack of information or situation you can't control. So if we break it down into the different stages, we can feel comfortable and we can feel more confident on that journey forward. And that's sort of how I sort of operated in the early days.
Yeah, I love that. It seems like you veered away from the detailed planning, but I wonder if your ADHD brain may have been able to calm down a little bit with the clarity and certainty on what the plan was.
I think that's right. And once I was sort of in the groove, or sort of getting that dopamine hit by sort of doing my passion of business, which is what it kind of became, I then sort of got that confidence to push ahead.
Yeah. So what was the very first business that you started, and kind of where did you take that business to?
Yeah, look, we started the group, and our first business was an electrical and security contracting business. And within the first couple of years, it grew to about 5 or 6 staff. And we then we took the big change when we founded Advanced Security, and we acquired the Siemens business.
Okay. That's something that popped up in the research that we did beforehand as being kind of a step change for you. And I believe it was just kind of post 9/11 that you made that acquisition?
Yeah, look, Siemens had hurt globally, like many corporates had post September 11, and I guess there was just this opportunity that emerged in a staff discussion they had, that I took that opportunity and sort of pitched a business plan and did a deal on part of that business in NZ. And so that was a real step change for us. That unlocked new customers and new opportunities. And yeah, it was that first acquisition, but it wasn't like a normal acquisition we do these days. We couldn't do DD. We couldn't do so much stuff. It was a big step of faith and a big risk we took.
How familiar were you with the Siemens operating business in New Zealand? I'm guessing you knew top line, bottom line, number of staff, that sort of thing?
Yeah. And because I'd come from some large multinational sort of electrical contracting companies and ran divisions, I knew how the numbers worked and how productivity worked and revenue per employee and stuff like that. So yes, I could kind of reverse engineer different pieces of it I needed to and go from there.
So the business that you were operating, the one that you had founded, the TPT brand, I'm gathering, you then went and bought Siemens. What was the difference in scale between your business and Siemens? I'm guessing it was the small buying the big.
Look, the business needed work that we bought.
Yeah.
What was very different is the client base, because it was very much government and enterprise, and we could cherry pick a bunch of people, which worked really well. So we started off very lean, but we managed to really turn that business around kind of day one, to be honest.
Okay. You've been quoted on a number of times of talking about the integration and then shifting some fundamental elements of the business post-acquisition to being a part of your success. Can we kind of dig a little bit deeper into that? I'm curious about the process that you have that may have been built post-Siemens, but the things that you do to understand what makes a business a great business to buy, and then how you go about understanding the changes that need to be made in that business, if any.
Yeah, look, I think anyone can buy a business. We often joke that any idiot can buy a business, but it takes more than an idiot to kind of integrate it and make that acquisition successful. And I think, firstly, is understanding why you're buying it. I mean, can you actually add value to it? And I'm not talking from a monetary perspective. I'm saying, can you strategically add value to it? Does it strategically add value back to your organisation? What is that kind of fit? And that's a really, really important thing. What's the cultural alignment of the people piece? And does it have good bones? And what we typically mean by good bones is, does it have an organisational structure, or does it all hinge around the owner, and those sorts of things. And we sort of work on a 5-stage plan in, I guess, the process up to transaction. And the first one is what we call the trust and alignment stage. And that's sort of catching up with, if it's a privately owned business, the owner of it, and it's the same kind of thing, to be honest, if it's a corporate or a multinational owned business. But that trust and alignment stage. So they need to understand, are we truly a willing buyer? And we need to understand, are they truly a willing seller? Do we have that trust between us? Is there that cultural alignment? Is there kind of the fit we think's there? And I think that's the hardest one, truly, to achieve in the process, right? And in the past, we've often given referees from 3 companies we've bought, so that they can actually get that trust up front about us, that we're not about having them on or screwing them down on price or anything like that. We've always paid what we've paid in a transaction. What we've pitched to start with, we've always paid, right? The second one from there is really the price piece, right? And it's the second hardest. And I guess it's because all vendors have a dream of what their business might be worth, and some of them pitch a big hockey stick that's about to happen. We've sort of seen it all. But yeah, look, usually we can get across that pretty easy. And then for us from there, it's really, sale and purchase, which is easy, and DD. And we run very standard DD lists today, which we circulate very early so they know what they're dealing with, and we just put it up in SharePoint and they can upload. And most of it for us is we generally know by that point if we're going to buy it anyway. And it's more a case of actually us understanding the business to help us integrate. And then we sort of work through what's to the transaction. So then we have what's called a things we need to do, standardised lists, and it targets every single minute thing you can imagine that needs to be completed pre-transaction and post-transaction. And so that seems to run really, really well. And then we sort of go into 5 stages post-transaction too. And those 5 stages is, again, is about people and culture first, right? So we're a people-first organisation, so they have to understand our culture. And I guess customers follow people, so you want to engage your people as well. So what we always do in an acquisition on the first day is we say, hey, that we know this has been a bit of a shift for you guys and a change and a bit of stress, is, hey, take your families out for dinner on us, right? Because that's our culture and we're about recognising people. So, we share the history of the business and where we've come from. We share about our values. We share our dreams and our vision for the business, because I believe people want to be part of an organisation that's going somewhere and it has an exciting future. And then we sort of say from there, it's the business as usual phase, right? So, hey, we might have a different brand on the shirt, or we could be the same brand, but hey, get out and love the customer, right? So the customer sees continuity, the same great service and things like that. Then our next phase is what we call the learning phase, right? And the learning phase is, and I think this is where so many get it wrong with M&A, is how do we truly learn from the business we've purchased? Because we pay a whole chunk of money around goodwill, but we're paying that for a reason, right? Because they've got IP, they've got smarts, they've established a business. So let's understand that. Let's learn how they do it. Every business we've ever done, there's things that business that we've purchased does better than us. How do we actually get hold of that? But equally in that learning phase, how do they learn about how we do it? And so they really get invested then in our systems, and we'll take things out of theirs into ours and on to move forward. And that's what we call the integration phase, and it's so that we become one system and one business. And then we what we call the last is really that transformational phase. And what we're trying to do is 1 + 1 actually equals 3. All right, it's this new, bigger, better business. And through those 5 stages post, we have an integration manager or integration lead who's assigned by group, and they're the everyday point of contact for that team that's coming in, getting integrated in, where they can ask all the silly questions, right? Because often in the line structure of reporting, they don't want to ask those questions, but when you have an integration person, everyone feels happy, and that person's checking in on their barometer on how they're doing and things like that.
Okay. Mike, that's a masterclass in how to go about buying a business. Thank you. I'm going to kind of dig a little bit under the surface of each of these points. I just wanted to repeat back just to make sure that I and the listeners have got this properly. So the first and I think you said the most important phase was the getting alongside, building trust and understanding alignment with the potential acquiring party. Second bit, then I think you said this is the second hardest part, is establishing a price and kind of getting a bit of a, leading on to the heads of agreement, which would lead into the sale and purchase. Then you jump into the DD, which I'll come back and ask in a second. And the last thing is you establish a list of like the to-do list, which is the things that we need to go about to make sure that the acquisition and the intention that we had for it is a success for us and a success for them. Have I got those pre-stages right?
correct,
Okay, great. I'm guessing, so that very first stage, I just want to unpack these. So the first stage, trust and alignment, I'm guessing that's binary. So in other words, it either passes that phase or it doesn't pass that phase. So there's not a lot of grey that would sit in there. Is that correct?
No, yeah. And we get to that point pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And to be honest, over a cup of coffee or over a lunch, you can kind of get to that point. Is there a fit? Do you feel that your gut feel right? I trust my gut a lot and that feel as well. And people deal with people, right? So you have to sort of be able to fit with that sort of vendor and think, hey, because you still got to work with them through the process, of the journey of the transaction too. But look, we found it worked really, really well.
Yeah.
But it's spending time at that phase, and sometimes that phase can take a long time.
Right.
It might not just be one meeting; it might take a year to get to that point.
Wow. Okay. And so you're having formal and informal conversations with the owner, with the shareholders of that business. You're understanding what it is that their kind of plans and intentions are. I'm guessing you're looking for things like highs and lows in the business, looking for consistencies in conversation, looking for behaviour traits. Have I kind of got that right?
And
what else?
And one thing I always ask vendors, if it's a privately owned business too, what was your dream when you started this business? What was your vision for this business? I think that's really important.
Yeah.
The other thing I always say too is, the business I've got is my baby, right? And I know if I was selling it, it would be like I'd be hacksawying my leg off. That would be kind of what it would feel, right? And that's how a vendor feels, right? And it's really respecting that. So I often say that, look, the process of this is, I know this has been your baby, and we are a really good owner, but we want to understand what's important to you, what's your dream for the business, and all these types of things. So we can be a good steward owner of the business, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it's really important.
Yeah, I get that. Any relationship, I was once told, and I have had no reason to challenge this, fundamental underpinning of the relationship is communication, open two-way communication, and expectations. So in other words, being clear about what each party's expectations is.
Yeah.
And from the back end of that comes alignment. So if we're able to talk about things and then we understand what each other's expectations are, then we can either achieve or not achieve alignment.
Yeah, 100%.
And so you build that really, really early on. That's quite counter to what a lot of other people experience when someone's looking to buy their business, especially the bigger the business, the less of that they experience. And so that's really refreshing to hear that that's your approach. Do you think that's markedly different to what a faceless global would go through?
I think it is. Look, but even if we were buying something off a multinational corporate, again, establishing that trust stage is so important. To have that credibility, to have that trust, to understand who we are and what's important to us. Because even a multinational, it's important on what happens to that division there. It's still their reputation as well.
Of course. Within the multinational, there's likely to be an M&A team, and those folk are not known to pull any punches, and they can be quite numbers-centric and also occasionally quite aggressive around things, whereas your approach actually flips that completely on its head, which I love. If we move on to the price phase, so different industries, different businesses would carry different valuations, clearly and obviously, but how do you establish what is a reasonable price?
Yeah, look, so usually we would look at sort of... we ask for 3 years sort of tax accounts and obviously budgets. We will value the target or the business internally, but we'll usually get it valued externally, independently, and we won't give any steerage to that independent. We just want a completely independent lens on valuation. Usually we come in higher, and that's okay. It's just like we're just testing our thinking, and what we don't want is we don't want to undervalue the business either, because we want to disengage the vendor. So and that usually works really, really well. I mean, sometimes I've sat there before for vendor, and because we won't usually just pitch a price in an email, we will sit down, and because we've got about a 12-page sort of non-binding indicative offer letter, I would sit with you if you were the vendor, and we'd step you through every one of those clauses on that non-binding offer and explain this is how we valued it and this is sort of why. And usually we'll get a pretty good vibe straight away how that's sort of sitting. I've had one many years ago, that sort of said, oh no, I really wanted more than that, Mike. And I sort of said, well, what if it was this? Or, we just sort of talked it through, right? Because again, we're trying to make the numbers work. So.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. And so at that stage, with that kind of price backwards and forwards, do you then establish what the structure of the deal is likely to look like? So in other words, the potential for the earnout, the cash, the warranties, those sorts of things, or does that come later?
Yeah, look, I guess when we presented the non-binding indicative offer, it would be the structure. So it would be, hey, is it a base amount at transaction, then an earnout, or is it just all in one transaction?
Yeah.
We're not great fans of earnouts. It's not. They're not generally received well by vendors, I guess. But when a vendor pitches a hockey stick, it's the only option we have because we have to de-risk ourselves. Because I guess we're about sustainable earnings, right?
Yes.
And it's the only way we can really manage that through.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. What's your preferred valuation methodology? So, there's net present value, discounted cash flow, there's weighted average, there's, balanced, all these kind of different approaches.
when we get it independently, it's usually priced on a number of different scenarios. We're more looking at EBITDA, so we're very EBITDA focused.
Yeah, great. The other thing that I've always found really interesting is that some acquirers look to previous years and say, we're looking to buy the business of this year, so we're going to value it at X times whatever this year's profit is. And so, clearly you're not buying the business that was in the past, you're buying the future business.
Yeah.
Picking up on the point that you made about the hockey stick and, hopes and dreams about the business, a 3X number from any previous year of profit is clearly something which is going to be very, very difficult for that business to achieve. So do you do that kind of weighted average thing over the course?
We kind of weight it, so we sort of look at, hey, what's the last 3 years look like if it's a pretty consistent revenue business, but what's out the windscreen? And we can tilt that a little bit either way on where we kind of think it sits.
Yeah.
Again, if we know it's a target we want to buy, and if we've actually worked through the exercise properly and what's the value we can add and things like that, we understand the strategic benefit of it. And we have a bit of a lens to what it financially looks like post-transaction. So sometimes we can pay a premium because we can see the complete picture.
Yeah, okay, great. So you've got the price has been agreed, non-binding indicative offer, so letter of intent kind of thing, and then you move into the sale and purchase. And so the sale and purchase agreement is where you start to nut out the real kind of nitty-gritty of the deal. Typically, by the way, you mentioned, I'm just going to jump back a step, that the trust and alignment phase could be over a couple of cups of coffee. It could take as much as a year to kind of get alongside and work out, are these people our sort of people? Then the price piece probably happens relatively quickly, I'm guessing.
Yeah, look, generally it's probably 2 weeks for us.
Wow.
Yeah.
2 weeks?
Yeah.
That's remarkable. A very, very stressful time for the party that's being bought. So that's a super great kind of speed to be able to move through that. The sale and purchase agreement, so what's typically involved in that for you?
We've just done a couple of those, and they were about 7-day turnarounds.
Wow, okay.
To signed.
Yes.
But generally, probably because we've done a lot of M&A, our further terms are pretty well rounded today. They've been through lots of vendors, lawyers. So generally, there's not a lot of that jumps out from the vendors, solicitors, or legal counsel these days. So
Okay,
great. And then our DD we go into is a 20-day DD.
20 days, yeah, remarkable. You've mentioned not being a fan of earnouts. So does that mean you tend to favour cash up front deals?
Yeah, generally cash up front.
Yeah, great. Have you done much, if I can ask, or anything around people flipping and taking scrip in the main business? So in other words, transferring?
No, we've never done it.
Yeah,
no.
okay.
So we still own 100% from our perspective. So,
yeah, got it. So DD, so that is I'm not going to delve all the way into that because it's typically quite an involved process, although you did say 20 days. I think you try and get through that in, which is, again, remarkable. We've had a number of guests on the show that have talked about a year of DD and just the brutality and the difficulty of it. So what are some of the 3 to 5 critical things that you really want to understand as part of DD?
Well, again, we're trying to we're valuing a business on sustainable earnings, right? Or it might be on this hockey stick. And so we want to know what's underneath those earnings. What are the revenue streams? Are they recurring? What's the risk of those revenue streams? Are they backed by contracts? Is there change of control clauses in those contracts? Yep. What's the revenue, or of the biggest customers, what's the percentage of revenue? So again, we're looking at risk around that commercial piece. We're also looking at legal DD. Again, depends if it's an assets purchase or share purchase as well, to how deeply dive into which area. So obviously if it's a tax a share purchase, we're going to be diving into the tax piece and be needing letters from their accountants and different things like that to get comfort around that piece.
Yes. Okay, great. I'm presuming you have a team of people that kind of run through that process in your business?
Yeah, so all DD's done in-house.
Right, yep, great. Next, things we need to do, the to-do list. So that's the kind of actually taking the business over. What does that tend to look like normally?
Oh, look, it's everything from registering a company to opening a bank account to increasing a limit on one of our finance teams. It's to creditor accounts, to uploading backups, to uniforms, to signage, to changing insurance and doing this here. It's everything you can imagine. But these are substantial spreadsheet things with priorities to deadlines to who's assigned what task, and these run post-transaction as well, so they can cover a year post-transaction.
Yes.
And it just helps us to keep our heads around, make sure we're not missing something vital, because that anything we miss will cause pain, right?
Yes.
So generally these lists are well established and out of multiple transactions, and we just keep on then refreshing those and then managing. But that's what we call it. We call the things we need to do, and that's what we typically share with a vendor as well.
Yeah.
So they see we've got our heads around it.
Yes.
So.
I love the simple name that's been given to what is essentially a very complex Gantt chart-based project management approach.
Things we need to do. Right?
I love it. Before we move into the post-deal, which is equally important, I just wanted to touch on a couple of really critical aspects of this. So you've clearly got a strategy with TPT Group, and so if you're comfortable to share that could be quite confidential, so I appreciate if that's not the case. But the second piece, the extension question of that, would be how do you ascertain whether a business is going to be a really clear fit with your strategic intent over time?
You look, really good questions, and from a group perspective, we're quite diverse today, right? Because we've got a commercial industrial property business, Promessa, we've got a technology leasing, which is really a finance business, and then we've got a whole bunch we've got a trade rental vehicle business now for vehicles, very, very different to what's over this other side, which are really technology businesses, and they've been electronic security and advanced security, IT Engine, which is an MSP, Microsoft service provider, or managed service provider, CableNet, ASG Tech, and Everalert, and a correctional security company as well. And so they're very, very, very different. We've sort of broken the group in half about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, to really, so our independent directors will sit over on this side, and then we've got a different sort of governance over the other side. So we've sort of kind of broken into a family office versus direct investment businesses and such. So what we're kind of looking at over here is, if you look at the technology business, where most of our M&A happens, is how do we position our business for the future, and I guess to really create that USP in the markets that we're in and increasing that sort of capability. And I think, what we've in these technologies business and converging them together, which is what we're doing, I think really positions us quite uniquely in the market. And I think it's... my old chairman had a really good way of saying it. It's kind of like the strands in a rope. When 5 come together, we have a real strength in that market space and a different sort of capability to if we were just an electronic security company or just an IT company. So again, now we sort of see in the whole future and connected world and tech as businesses do converge, and we have to change and we have to position our business forward. So our role has always been how we position our business for the future. And from a TPT perspective, our tagline is kind of is growing great businesses, right? So we're out there to try and enable our businesses to achieve their market potential. That's what we're out to do. How do we build great businesses? Yeah,
I love it. So a diversified conglomerate is the name that would have been attached to the business back in the 80s, back in the days of kind of M&A and when it was kind of rampant. But clearly you've got some sectors that you have a real focus on and a strength within. How do you find companies to buy?
Look, we do get contacted from brokers. We generally prefer to deal direct with a vendor. So we have contacted multinationals with large corporates about different pieces of their businesses. and we get in front of them and have a conversation. Or even privately owned businesses will generally approach and say, look, can we catch up for a coffee and have a conversation, and have you ever considered this? And get it really straight from the horse's mouth. We've also have used some brokers in the past to hunt out targets for us. So lots of different things, no real one way, I guess, but the most successful has been direct approach.
Yeah, got it. And you maintain a great network. You've been in business for a while, and so people start to know, who you are and what you're up to. Do you think the outcome changes for the acquired party if they contact you versus you contacting them? The whole thing, there's a bit of a belief set around folk that it is better to be bought than it is to be sold.
Oh, look, I think it just comes down to who you're selling to. I mean, I think we wouldn't treat the vendor any different, in the process. We would still be about the same things and same value too, I think. So, you might find if they're sort of wanting a premium, then that might be change it. But yeah.
Okay. You've talked about values as being really important because you want to make sure that the business that you're buying, the individuals that come with the business, because we haven't managed to do away with staff just yet. There's got to be a good values alignment. What are the values that you operate to as a group?
Yeah, I guess it is around the integrity. It is about trust. It is about respect. It's about growth. It's really our core values. But what we've got to be really mindful, if we're integrating a business into our culture, that could disrupt our team and culture. And we looked at one transaction a few years back, and we got right to the end of DD, and we're actually really happy. Everything was great. Actually, it got a tick in commercial and legal and everything like that. And you usually just say, yes, that's a tick. And, but I sort of said to my CFO before I left the office, it's got a niggle, I just got a niggle. And I woke up the next morning, texted them, we're out. All right, and it was just that what I really reflected is the culture didn't fit our business, and we would have lost many of our good people if we'd brought that business in.
Yeah.
Right, and we're not going to do that to our people, and it would have had an impact on their business too. So, just the fit wasn't there, right? So you've got to be prepared to walk away. So we often say we hold them really lightly and loosely. You don't get over emotional around it because it has to work for the vendor and it has to work for us.
Yeah.
We've got to know we can really add value. It's going to fit. Otherwise, it's going to be a train wreck. Again, any idiot can buy a business.
Yes. There's an expression in business which is that some of the more complex things in life are remarkably easy to get into, yet incredibly hard to get out of. So starting or buying a business can be pretty straightforward. Agree a price, get a sale and purchase agreement, off you go. Getting into a marriage is really easy. Starting a family is really easy. All those things have big ramifications and consequences. So that's quite clear here. I'm guessing this has probably changed over time. I'm curious about the role of finance, so financiers for these deals. I'm guessing that Siemens was probably took on some debt to be able to do that deal.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting journey. So we've always been about building a balance sheet.
Yeah.
Since I went into business, we've owned everything, right? Everything. So we own hundreds of cars, and we own property, and we own our photocopiers, we own everything, right?
Wow.
And it's just, we've always been about building a balance sheet, right? Because then we can run the distance. So when the tough times come, we've got a balance sheet, right? So that's what we've always been about. And I guess we've always been about investing back into the business. We haven't been about ripping all the money out of it. We've been about how we build a great business, and that's by investing in that business. And yeah, look, we do use our CAF facility out of corporate banking on how we'll fund M&A deals and stuff like that. But again, we've got a balance sheet to support what we do, and that's been a big thing for us.
Yeah, okay, great. Let's jump into the post-deal phases, so the 5 phases that you mentioned, making sure that you've got a good kind of people and culture approach and a plan around integrating those folk into yours. There's the business as usual phase, which sounds like it's a very outward-facing, get out and love the customer, understand what their needs and opportunities are and how we're doing well, and referrals and all that sort of stuff, I'm guessing. The learning phase, so how do we truly learn from the business we've bought, which I love, by the way. Integrating the business into our core operations, and then any transformation that's required. Have I got that right in terms of the 5 steps? Okay. Let's talk about the people and culture bit. So you've talked about your values. They tend to reflect quite well on the culture. But if someone was to be bought by TPT, what would they see? Because I'm always interested in the behaviour, because culture is manifested through behaviour and how we communicate to each other.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, I think those values is what they should see, is about that trust and respect. And we will dive, like we have extensive sort of staff benefits policies and recognition policies from... we have about 40 staff awards a year where our people nominate their peers for awards. They're not allowed to nominate themselves, because in a great culture, it's not about yourself, it's about your peers, right? But you can't win an award if you haven't participated in the awards. And, you know, in our business, any manager, we've got 63 managers across the group, any manager can send an employee and their family out for dinner on us. Right, that's what they'll see in the everyday. Our expectation is 15 to 20 families a month go out for dinner on us, even now in these times, right? Because that's about recognising the person, recognising the family. That's our values. I think that they have to see that we're putting our money where our mouth is, because people talk this stuff, but they don't actually genuinely do this stuff, right? So the first day saying, hey, go and take your families, you and your families out for dinner individually and to $200 and claim it back, and is, oh wow, that's different. You know, so we have a staff crisis fund, so any staff can apply confidentially financial support. We have, it's kind of an unlimited sick leave thing, so if you're unfortunate to have a life-threatening disease, we'll fund 80% of your salary for 12 months, and we cough for that. Because that's about looking after our people. So these are things where we think are really, really important. And, you know, we do newsletters to homes because it engages the family. The spouse gets to read what dad does at work and understand who this organisation is. And we do EAP, and there's all sorts of things we do. So, you know, what we're doing that first day is, or that first week, is we're actually really showing them who we are. And again, establishing that real trust piece as well. But also in that first week, or sometimes weeks, is if it's integrating into one of our teams, there'll be pizzas and beers each week to try and actually just get our teams filling together and feeling comfortable and stuff like that.
Love it. Drucker famously said that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's quite clear that you've got a pretty detailed and comprehensive strategy. So I'm guessing that probably you've had some experiences where there has been maybe individuals or maybe a group within a business, but have you had experiences where you've bought a business and you've seen that there is a bit of a cultural mismatch in some way, shape or form? And if so, how did you go about trying to change that culture?
Leaders set the culture or allow the culture. So sometimes where we have a cultural issue, it can even be in our current business where we might have a branch which we identify to be a weaker culture, and how we sort of reinforce that culture or that leader around that, and things like that. But look, it's a hard thing to change, but I think the culture only change when they really see our values in practice. And I think in a great culture too is the team will push the people out who are not the right culture.
Yep.
The team will push them out, right? And that could be the troops on the ground will push them out because they know that's not the right behaviour, or they'll raise it up in that sort of in a great culture.
Yeah. Business as usual phase. So get out and love the customer. So often customers can be quite concerned about what the new acquirer's intention is. So I'm guessing a part of it is to communicate what the strategy and what the plan is, to make sure that their relationship, should it be a good one, hopefully it is a good one, will continue and will only evolve and get better. What else do you tend to do when you go out, when you're endeavouring to kind of bring the customers along on the journey with you?
Yeah, look, I think it's how we message as well. I mean, we often say, hey, we've acquired this business and it's joining forces with us because it presents better to the market. I mean, we keep it so under the cone of silence for so long about the target we've got. Even our own people don't know really till right to the last day sort of thing. And obviously that's when customers find out as well, right? Because just the way it has to be to protect the interests of the vendor and the business we're acquiring. But yeah, so we tend to have a media release we do. We do have prepared statements that the staff can hand out to customers in the physical, and obviously those key customers are contacted directly for discussions and sort of follow-up meetings. So we sort of drive that engagement plan because they need to hear from us, not from someone else.
Yeah, got it.
Right. So yeah, and there's always learning on that. Sometimes things get out, and so there's always risks around that.
Yeah, understood. Speaking of learning, the learning phase is the next one. How do you do that? So how do you learn from that business?
I think it's just slowing things right down, actually. I think the learning phase is actually the longest phase. In fact, the learning phase could actually be 18 months. Right? It's kind of not rushing in and changing everything, right? Yeah, there's certain things that need to change. They need to come onto our payroll. They might have to come onto our GL, but hey, Rome wasn't built in a day. We can go slow here because, again, that change causes... again, stress equals a lack of information or situation you can't control. So everything's been changed around you and you can't control it. It causes stress and it causes people to go, I'm over this, I can't cope with this, Entrepreneurs are good at coping with all that change, but actually not everybody is. And so we've got to just go on that journey and really how we kind of capture that, what they really do well. And again, that they feel comfortable with us. And we're ISO accredited and audited, so we have to have a fully controlled system and processes and procedures and forms and all that type of stuff. And so whatever they've got kind of has to be integrated in the end, because at some stage they'll be audited and things like that. So that's kind of our business.
Yeah. Okay, got it. We've touched on the integration piece there. Is there anything else that might be helpful for people buying a business to know? Yeah,
look, I think the gem there is, which we didn't do in the early years, was the integration manager and lead. It's such a valuable role, and someone who's out of our core team, who knows our values really well, who's a great measure of the barometer of the business we've acquired, what's the culture doing, what's the people doing, chewing the fat, having cups of coffee, hey, what do you need, how can we help you, and things like that has been just a gem.
Yeah, wow, okay. They might be varied by background, but is there a typical profile of person? Like, is it a project manager or is it a finance person, or what kind of typical skills?
It's generally been people who have been a reasonably high manager role in our group.
Yeah.
They may have been a previous regional manager or branch manager or business manager.
Yeah.
They may have hung that hat up, and they've really so we've got a special strategic projects manager who does that role. But we've also had other in corporate services do that role in the past for integration.
Interesting question for you. So with a cash deal and the no kind of earn-out approach that you tend to prefer, I'm guessing that ordinarily that would mean that the CEO, the founder, doesn't come with the deal. They don't start with the company. Is that correct, or do you have exceptions to that?
Look, it all comes down to if it's a privately owned business, I guess probably, I don't know if I would be employable, right?
Neither.
But often people decided to sell, it's because they've come to the conclusion they really want to hang the hat up and, hang the tool belt up and really go and enjoy the fruits of their labour for many, many years. So we would generally, at a minimum, we would want an ambassador role, right? So they might not be an employee, they might finish at transaction, but generally we'll want an ambassador role for 6 to 9 months. That's an unpaid role, and all that means is we can list them on our website. We can wheel them in if a customer had an issue or anything like that. If an employee had an issue, we've never had to do that, but that's just an example. That's kind of the minimum. A couple of times they've sort of had a sort of 6 month fixed duration period. Some vendors prefer that, so it's a bit of a discussion. And we had one vendor many years ago who we did a deal, and he said, look, but understand, Mike, I'm only going to work for you for 6 months. We got halfway through DD, and he says, actually, I want to work for you permanently. And he worked for us for 4.5 years till he retired, which was kind of lovely, really. So, but he was just a great, humble, level 5 leader, just a great guy.
Yeah.
So.
It's a Jim Collins-esque reference for those that are unfamiliar. We've both clearly read Good to Great and absorbed it really well. Interestingly, Jim was interviewed a little while later, and he said that we wanted to call it servant leadership, but we didn't think that the time was right for that. And so essentially those terms are interchangeable. It's a wonderful leadership model. I'm going to talk to it briefly and then ask if this is yours. So that the essence of servant leadership is giving people what they need, not necessarily what they want, and then including them in the critical aspects of a decision-making process that will have a major impact upon them, and then finding opportunities to grow those individuals and making sure that there's a really effective feedback loop in place. So that's me doing a bit of a teaching moment, but is that kind of how you describe your leadership style, Mike?
Yeah, look, really love the Jim Collins stuff and Level 5 leadership. We teach Level 5 leadership in the business. We're about to building up and growing Level 5 leaders, and so I lead internal leadership training days in the business. A couple of years ago, I think we put 60 through. So I've got one coming up actually, and that's about developing our young leaders, understanding what leadership actually is, because I think people think leadership's or a manager is leadership, but it's actually not. It's, leadership is something we will never ever master. We're on this journey, right? And it's the thing about Level 5 leadership. If you ever thought you were a Level 5 leader, it means that you're not a Level 5 leader, right? Because that would be probably pride, but it's like, but we really, really believe in it. We believe it's what drives great businesses.
Yeah, I completely agree. I heard a great quote once, leadership is a decision, not a position.
Yeah.
And I think about positional management, where it's something that you're appointed into a role and you have a title, team leader, manager, whatever it might be. And so that bestows power on you, and power is not leadership.
I often laugh. I speak quite a lot on leadership, and I remember when I worked for an electricity lines company when I was very, very young, right? I would have been about 21, and I remember having a desk, having a phone on, and I had a business card. And gosh, I felt significant, so it's kind of funny. Funny looking back.
Yeah.
The journey of leadership and how we change and we get some edges rounded off us and
Yeah.
a few scars along the way that shape us.
Shape us and build humility, I think, as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tony Robbins talks about significance as being a core, one of the fundamental aspects of being a human, but it's from the outside could be viewed as being positive, but he frames it as being significance is not a good thing. It's not something that you want to have more of in your life, because then you're craving others to recognise you and elevate you, and therefore you're putting kind of your place in the world in the eyes of others is more important than how you carry yourself and how you act.
Yeah, it's really interesting, eh?
Yeah. So you've been through, I'm guessing you've bought 15 companies, so that probably means you've spoken to well over 100 prospects that could be opportunities to bring into the TPT group. What are some kind of couple of three critical things that you've seen that people have done wrong early on in that journey that has meant that you go, this is just not the right thing for me?
I think sometimes people don't give it the time it should have to really listen. They might think, no, just not for sale. Well, actually, it's still worth having a discussion because, again, it might not be now, it might be in 3 years' time, but, it's still an opportunity to engage and have a conversation, I think. And is there an alignment? Because it might be to say, well, actually, that probably is the right purchaser. I just need to get my business in shape, right? And I think, I think the other thing too is every business should always be in good shape and be available for sale too. And I think people, we've always been a believer, keep your personal stuff out of your business and keep your business clean and things like that. And I think those are mistakes people can make or privately owned businesses can make. So
Yeah. I once heard a builder, I think it was, that talked about extruded fiberglass as being a product that he needed to buy. He was running the purchase of his surfboards through his business. He and his whole family were mad keen surfers, and so they had like 25 surfboards or something, and they talked about it as being a business product. And so that's clearly what you're referring to there, is your business is your business, and keep those two things clean.
Keep it clean and keep it.
Yep.
really helps when someone's looking at buying it. So.
Yeah, I totally understand and agree with that. You've described acquisitions as being whisper moments. So how do you recognise when a business opportunity is worth pursuing versus kind of not? And what is a whisper moment?
Oh, look, I think you kind of get this sort of gut feel, or look, I can tell you a funny story is many years ago I had a manager coming to join us from a competitor. And I got a ring from one of their directors. It was an Australian company, actually. And he said, actually, that guy that's coming over to you, you're not interested in taking over the lease on his car, are you? And I said, no, I'm not. We own all our fleet. And I said, oh, but I heard you guys might be pulling out in New Zealand. He says, yes, we are. We're pulling out on the 14th. And the whisper moment was, hey, I'll buy your phone numbers off you.
Interesting.
This crazy idea that comes into your mind, and you go, and he said, is this pause? And he says, what? You pay us some money and we divert our phone numbers for you because we're leaving the country? And I said, yes. You know, and it was just one of those cheeky cheeky deals. But I guess what's that sort of opportunity you sort of feel, or the idea comes into your head, do you actually respond on it, or do you just, oh no, won't bother doing that?
Yes.
Or we try and look for that. And also is, hey, if there is sort of an opportunity, someone says, like sometimes we'll get something come up through the business, hey, this could be a good business to buy, and we'll go, okay, let's go and have a look at it, right? Because they're a lot closer to it than us, and it could be something good that fits with us. You
Yes.
know? Yeah, so it's interesting at times, just sort of, hey, how are we going to explore something? But we trust our gut. I trust my gut a lot. You know, if it kind of feels right, or I can sort of see how it can sort of come in. And we work through a snapshot paper pretty quickly, which kind of looks at who the business is, what they do, what's the value adds both ways, that strategic fit, what the numbers are saying, what the strip out costs are, the deal structure, our valuation, the funding, and then there's sort of a high-level risk summary, you know, what could go wrong and things like that, and then the things we need to do. And that's sort of about a 4-page sort of document. And that's typically what goes to the board as well. So.
Yeah, okay. I really like that. That to me sounds like what I'd kind of describe as being a canvas, popularised by Alexander Ostweiler with the business model canvas, where you lay out the critical aspects and you kind of, as much as possible, squeeze it into a small real estate space, and those are the critical aspects that you need to be focused on, so you can kind of get it at a glance, you know, rather than leaving it.
And we can bang that out in a couple of days, usually around the target, and it just helps to test our thinking and challenge our thinking as well. So.
Yeah. The surprises or the whisper moments, just relaying another story. I was speaking to a founder yesterday, and they're in the publishing space. They purchased a magazine that was declining in sales, and the founder wanted to get out of the business, and they were kind of struggling to maintain the fixed expenses that they had, you know, leases and salaries and that sort of stuff. So they bought the business for $1, and a real positive surprise that came at the back end of that, what they didn't realise is that they'd bought essentially a barcode, which was the right to have that displayed and offered for sale in 5,000 merchants across New Zealand. So they bought 50,000 email database, but then also this subscription business, essentially, because to get into those retail outlets is very, very difficult. So you know, the whisper was, what's the other opportunity that sits in here? And then they dug a little bit deeper. It kind of transformed their other business. To what extent, when you buy a business, are you able to cross-pollinate? So in other words, you talked about 1 + 1 = 3, and to me, I would hear you say that as being, we can demonstrably add some value to this business, and we can kind of offer those things across to the rest of our customer set. Is that one thing? If so, how does that work, and what other things do you do?
Kind of the cross-sell between, you mean?
Yeah.
Look, it's interesting, and that's certainly what's driven some of our thinking often, because we sort of think, hey, we can be the 5 strands of the rope and be stronger in the market if we sort of have this. But I think probably any group of companies with different subsidiaries, it is a journey to really truly be able to cross-sell. And it's certainly something we haven't mastered, but we're on that journey, and it is working. And I think the more it integrates, and I think our own people have to see the converged business before the customers can see the converged business, because it's our people that have to share the converged business to our customers, right?
Yes.
So hey, when you deal with us, you got this you can have access to, right? Things like our finance business or leasing business has been great. That was one of those gaps we kind of saw, whisper moments, and we sort of established 19 years ago. Gosh, a long time ago. There's absolutely things how they touch and fit together. What we're trying to do now is, because we've got 20-something offices across NZ, so we're trying to have converged offices, so that's where we'll have several of the same different subsidiaries in the same office, because it drives the water cooler conversation and helps our people to really understand those cross-group discussions, which drives the customer
Yes.
wins as well.
Tech is obviously at the core of what you do as a business, and you're in the technology space within quite a lot of those organisations. So you've also been kind of heard to talk about, getting into leading edge technology. This is kind of a two-part question, so I'll deal with the first bit first. When you're looking at something which is emerging technology, how do you ensure that you're not kind of right at the bleeding edge, which is the space of too much risk and then probably more promise than delivery, versus getting into something at a leading edge? Because you've done some really interesting things at both of those phases. So how do you assess technology effectively?
Yeah, look, I mean, generally the main tech businesses we do, most of them are sort of more integration type businesses where they access global manufacturers and New Zealand manufacturers and integrate solutions and design and wrap these up and deliver to customers and have a lifelong journey with that customer. That's kind of what we're out to do. Our sort of more the pointy end innovation has been the ASG tech business, which is around drones and AI and all that stuff. And certainly we've been on the real end, pointy end and the bleeding edge of that, and we spent millions on some things, and then we've had to just pause on them and it's probably been a shareholder pause to the disgust of my directors at times. It's the only time we've got independent board of directors, so it's the only time we've ever put a shareholder hat on was over one of those where I think we spent $3 million the board wanted to carry on and the shareholders didn't.
Interesting.
So, look, I think we're still learning that space. Look, there's lots of different tech things we have developed and we have been able to commercialise, and that sort of piece of the business very much positions the other businesses forward for the future and those customers for the future. They've done some amazing cool projects, like the Doc AI project on Predator stuff, which you may have seen. Yep. Amazing drone tech and automated drone stuff and things like that too. But some of these projects, we're really on that pointy end is sometimes the market's not ready for them yet either, and so that's some of the things where we continue to learn, we certainly haven't got it all right yet.
Yep. AI, you've mentioned it, so I know that it'll be kind of quite high on your agenda of things that are opportunities but also potential risks inside your business. Are you more optimistic or more concerned about the role of AI as we lead into the next kind of 3 to 5 years?
Oh, look, I think we're optimistic around it. I mean, the ASG tech business has been quite a long way down that road for years. We're probably a bit slower in that space at the moment, but we are going through a business transformation thing internally around AI at the moment and process automation, so on how we can use it to do things smarter. Mm-hmm. So we've sort of got a working group together for that at the moment.
Yes. And
getting some external assistance to help us on that journey. So.
Yeah, got it. Do you have a view at this point, and we're not an AI podcast, but I am curious as to how that technology or technology set will influence the future of work for people? You've got a 500 staff across the group, is that right?
Near 300. Yeah.
300, yeah, okay. So,
look, I've had different views over the years, and I've sort of thought, I did some training through Singularity and that, and then sort of thought, I looked out the future and I thought, gee, it really could disrupt jobs. But look, I'm changing my view on that now. I sort of think so many jobs and careers are actually getting created. Yeah, absolutely, there's impact to probably some of the traditional more admin roles or legal roles or different things like that. But look, I think there's this natural transformation, and we've seen this through all the different industrial revolutions and different things like that. And so, I think there's still a future for everybody. There's certainly a number of roles that just can't be automated. Yeah. So it looks interesting. So, but I think we have to disrupt ourselves in business, right? Yeah. We can't wait to be the victim. We actually have to embrace this stuff and test it and look at it and see how it can benefit us to position our business. Because if we're not doing that, our competitors will be, and it will end up being irrelevant. And New Zealand has to embrace the future, because if we don't, the jobs of the future will be in another country, so we have to position this country forward. So.
Yeah, there's a risk for New Zealand of us becoming, the dairy farm and the wood supplier, and a nice place to go and look at the dairy farm and the wood supplier as a tourist.
Yeah.
I note recently that we were number 33 out of 37 countries in terms of our AI adoption. So we're quite a long way behind the curve at the moment, which is a little bit concerning.
Yeah, look, I've been really concerned because we've started another charity called Innovation Franklin, because the concern of New Zealand been dropping those international innovation rankings.
Yep.
We've had a bit of a bounce, but look, New Zealand has to change the dial, and the message to the government is we need to change the dial. So
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, the revolutions that you talked about, I personally have a concern. This is the fourth industrial revolution as we're describing it. The first was the Industrial Revolution that happened in the 1700s, powered by steam. The second was the late 1800s, early 1900s, which was essentially the electricity revolution. Then we had the automation revolution of the 1960s, which was when computers went from the enterprise into the factory, into the home ultimately as well, and then now into our hands. And so the first one was the most tectonic shift for humans, and we had the rise of the thing called the Luddite. And the Luddite were the people that were accustomed to working in the fields and working with their hands, largely serfs, what may also be called peasants, but just that was the kind of class that they sat in at that stage. And they saw the invention of the loom and the steam engine as kind of being a real problem for them. So they actually started to smash up the machines, and they got known as the Luddites. At one point, interestingly in history, there were more of the King's army in the United Kingdom that were fighting the Luddites than were fighting Napoleon. Wow. So the Napoleonic War was going on at that stage. So it was a real kind of shift and a massive concern for people. Yeah. And so I think that electricity was probably something we all welcomed. Light and heating and cooking and all that sort of stuff. Less of a concern, and automation created a whole bunch of jobs. And so it's I'm of two minds at the moment myself as well. Certainly going to be a big shift in the middle class knowledge workers.
Yeah, I guess what our challenge as a country is we have to create the jobs. There's jobs there to be created, right?
Yes.
But if we don't be deliberate around that to position for the careers of the future, then we get left behind, and that's the big risk piece. So we have to be really proactive around it. So.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Shifting gears slightly, so you've talked about the new acquisitions. You give people the go out in the company. Take your family out in the company. Love that. There's also a quote that you had where you had during the GFC, you gave each of your employees $250 supermarket vouchers.
Yeah.
And then you noticed there was a boost in EBIT afterwards. Causation, correlation?
Yeah, look, it's interesting, right? I mean, I think we never did it for an EBIT earnings result. What we did it is because it was the right thing by our people, and we posted it to the homes, but I got some handwritten letters back from spouses, which is quite beautiful, right? That someone would go and actually do that. But I've always believed everything's a fruit of culture, right? And it's people first, and health and safety is a fruit of culture. Obviously, financial performance is customer delivery, is quality and delivery. Everything is a fruit of culture. And so look, that was one of those sort of moments where you send something and think, you sort of think it's just a cost you're going to do, but actually it does engage your people too, right? So, but I think, but you do it from the genuine reasons why you do it.
Yeah.
So.
I understand. So the next shift, and this will be our last, is that ADHD. So you have a charity which is around kind of enabling folk and families that are in that space. So tell us more about that charity. Tell us more why you kind of leaned into the philanthropic approach.
Yeah, look, well, firstly, I believe corporately we have, and individually, we have a responsibility for community. I think it's a really important thing. And actually, it's really important to our people and staff as well. But as shareholders, really, really important. So we've got to play our part. And I guess the Runway Foundation, which is a registered charity, which is about, giving people a runway for life who are impacted by ADHD. And so that's kind of parent support groups to help them on the journey, because it's tough. And often they've got ADHD themselves too. And after school programs and youth coaching and into secondary school, and really helping them through that journey. And because I think, and it really came out of us having children with ADHD, and I guess when this is probably now what Runway's going to be 10 years old this year, but there was nothing for us, and there was this great big hole, right? I guess at the moment everyone's talking, most days you open the Herald, there's an article about ADHD, and so it's suddenly become kind of a fashionable thing, but it's like, if you really got some extreme cases there, it's a really, really tough road, right? And so what we wanted to do, I guess it's a little bit of an entrepreneurial thing, right? You see a gap in the market or a need, you go and try and solve that. So we established Runway. Teresa and I, my wife, Teresa's the CEO of Runway, so leads that team. But they do amazing stuff. They completely change people's lives. They help young people to get through school, through the system, into careers, off to uni and different things like that. And they have waiting lists, people queuing up for it. And I think this is another thing in New Zealand we can do better because, people with ADHD, and my kids get it from me, but you're 3 times more likely to run a successful business if you have ADHD. That's a global stat if you Google it, right? But equally too, if we don't channel them into the right things, they'll get their dopamine hit in the wrong things, right? And this is probably what we see through some of our prison population and things like that too, right? So there's a real opportunity to position forward and for us to be a more entrepreneurial country and really, And what we try and say to these young people is you've got a superpower, right? Even for me, I could write a 40-page tender starting 11 o'clock at night and finishing at 2 in the morning when I was younger, right? Because I would just get in the zone and hyper-focus and go and smash it out of the park, right? We probably usually would take someone 2 weeks to do that, So Runway is really, really important to us and on how we sort of give back in that area. And equally Innovation Franklin is and the other charitable stuff we do as well. So.
Yes. Superpower, ADHD, I love that. We both share a membership in the organisation called Entrepreneurs Organisation, and it's often a topic of conversation that people are like, I think I might be ADHD. And I'm like, well, you probably are if you think that you are. And by the way, it's a really helpful thing to be able to succeed in what is ostensibly a very difficult world, being a founder of a business, being an owner of a business. So thank you for the work and the resources that you provide into that sector. It's invaluable.
Look, it's really, really rewarding. It's neat the impact we can actually have. So
yes. So I'm going to finish with one of your quotes and then ask you about the alternative career. You famously said, "Don't participate in recessions." Tell us more about that. So, how do you seize opportunities? How do you grow during times of, economic downturns? And
look, I think it's very easy to take on all the negative stuff that you hear on the radio and the TV, right? Sometimes you just need to turn the radio off, right? I remember years ago, there might have been the GFC, there was a commentator that they'd bring on an expert. And I remember messaging ZB to say, look, do you think you should really have, because the person's so negative and doom and gloom, it's just pushing the country more into a hole, right? I guess, what do we feed our mind with? We're going to be above the line or below the line. And I think, so our mindset's really, really important, because I think sometimes we can talk ourselves into a deeper thing in our own business. And so I think we have to have our own dashboard on where we get our business confidence from, and we do. We've got about 13 different things we look at. But I guess what you hear is relevant, or it's important, but again, sometimes you just need to turn it off. What we tend to do in the tougher times of the economy is we invest in our business. Great time to acquire, we use our balance sheet, let's go out to grow, right? Yep. Let's double down, let's go faster, right? Because we'll put our foot on the accelerator, other people take theirs off. Right, let's put our foot down and let's go for growth. Yep. Right, so and that's what we talk to. So, and that's generally what we've done the last few years. It's what we've always kind of done, right? So how do we keep on growing? How do we invest in our future? How do we position for the future?
Yes. We've now these days become pretty present and aware to the food diet that we have, and we know that fat is not bad; it's actually pretty good. Sugar is probably the devil if there was one. There's a whole variety of different types of gluten-free, FODMAP, paleo, so all these different diets. So we know about the food. What you're talking about there is what I refer to and others as the information diet, and being really conscious about what it is that you read, what it is that you hear, and the circles that you move in terms of the information that flows around. So personally, I 27 years ago stopped reading the newspaper as I had a moment of self-awareness, which I didn't have a lot of in my 20s, when I would pay attention to how I felt after reading the Herald, and I would feel terrible. Because it's all bad news. And so I literally stopped consuming news. Obviously, I consume business news and megatrends and what's going on, but that's not car crashes or genocide or the horrible things that can happen around the world. I don't consume it. And people say, but how do you know what's going on in the world? I'm like, if it's big enough, people will tell me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, one way or another, right?
So, yeah, absolutely. And if it's not that big, then I don't need to know about it. So that's my personal view on it.
Yeah, look, I think too is, I think, I often say, sometimes you come home from work and you've already had a tough day, right? And you're just kind of overwhelmed by life. Sometimes you just need to go to bed, right? Walk in the door and just go to bed, right? And because a tired mind is fertile ground for negativity too, and so mindset is such an important thing on how you approach the day, but I always love that. Tired mind is fertile ground for negativity, because it's when you wake at 2 a.m. or you don't get sleep and everything's worse, and knowing our own tank level is really important, and all this type of stuff on how we navigate these times. Right. So
I've never heard that before. A tired mind is fertile ground for negativity. I love it. I'll add something to that. Andrew Huberman, the podcaster I heard recently, was talking about the 3 a.m. thoughts, when you wake up and there's some stress or anxiety in your life. And he says, I refuse to believe anything that pops into my head between midnight and 6 a.m. I just refuse to listen to that narrative. It's not true. It's not real. I'm like, that's gold. I've used it since then.
It's absolutely. Yeah. So it's interesting, so that whole journey. But look, I think, again, these type of times I think right now businesses should be investing and getting moving. Right, that's what I think. So,
I agree. Yep, government and businesses should be investing. If we look back at major recessionary times, Great Depression, for example, the countries that were able to kind of spent their way out through investment in massive infrastructure projects, including New Zealand actually, and so partly government, but also definitely individuals. Rather than leaving money on the sidelines, don't buy another dozen houses because they're at a cheaper price. Invest in businesses, create jobs, and build the economy
going.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. It's our responsibility. I love the fact that you've talked about responsibility a lot as well. And so two parting questions for you. The first is, are there any kind of companies in New Zealand that you're quite excited about? There might be things in your stable, there might be things that are outside. So businesses that have got you a bit interested and excited right now.
Oh, look, I think, I guess what we're constantly looking at is what's our next stage of our growth in the business and what kind of fits with that. And we do identify a couple of sort of M&A targets in that sort of space on how we'd position forward. But look, I love seeing the rocket labs and these different types of things that are happening. And I have so many ideas in those different areas. It's been the entrepreneur in me sort of wants to go and do that. The business person in me has this control. So I'm a bit of both, know. So yeah.
If you've not seen it, there's a wonderful documentary called Wild, Wild Space, and they profile, SpaceX is obviously the big monster in the room, and then there's 3 smaller companies that they profile, and one of them is Peter Beck, Sir Peter Beck, with Rocket Lab. I'm not sure if you had the opportunity to meet him when the EO event happened, but met him and got a hat from him. What an incredible individual he is. But there's an eponymous line in there that's just so worth watching. The documentary is fascinating, but there's some really great characters in there. Last question for you, Mike. So in the alternate universe, so you're an entrepreneur and you've become like an M&A kind of entrepreneur as well. In the alternate world, the alternate universe, where there was another career that would have brought you deep satisfaction and given you meaning and purpose on this earth, what would that career have been?
It might sound weird. It probably would be just be doing community stuff actually, because engaging with people and just being real and authentic conversations and actually giving back is actually spins my wheels really. It's an important. I was very much on a corporate career. It's just that one day I sort of woke up and thought, hey, there must be more, right? And but I didn't really stay more than the last couple of gigs, a couple of years in those roles, because it was sort of like, I guess that's an entrepreneur in you too. You need high change. I need high change.
Yeah. Mike, we've covered an immense amount of ground. I'm going to call this the masterclass in M&A because it's really been super insightful for anyone that is looking to buy a business, but also those that have to have better understanding as to what the process of people who are experienced will go through with them when looking at their business. You've also dropped in a bunch of gems about being a better human being, the tired mind being a fertile ground for negativity, that's just living a better life, and also demonstrated a great humility and strong characteristics and traits around leadership. So, Mike, I really, really thank you for coming on the show today. Mike Marr, M-A-R-R, at LinkedIn, people okay to kind of do a connect with you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. And TPT Group is the name of the organisation. So, Mike, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. It's been great. It's been great conversation. Thanks, Josh.
Pleasure. Cheers, Mike.
Thanks.